Today on the Future Podcast, we have Kyle from Hedgehog Markets, who's slowly trying to corner the poly market and gambling scene in Solana. You better watch yourself because he's going to gamble on the future of your marriage. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you. Fantastic intro. I don't know about gambling on people's marriages, but yeah, we like to have fun on chain.
Love it. That's so good. Welcome to the show, sir. Why don't you give a little introduction to who you are, what got you to crypto and Solana, and then, of course, to joining the Hedgehog team and leading the show?
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it brief, but run through things quickly. So I majored in finance and moved to New York shortly after college. So I did prop trading and fixed income valuation. And the latter there, I was at one of the larger banks. And when you start working there, you can no longer basically self-trade options and stocks. And so I needed to fill that void with something. And that's where I got turned on to crypto. And that was sort of like the early days of Coinbase. You know, they had just a few assets listed and I started hearing about it, not really understanding the real benefits or what it was, but just that there was this wild volatility, which obviously caught my attraction and I remained interested. So I sort of connected with one of my employees. We would always talk about it. You know, we were talking about all these crazy ideas. And eventually I left that to do a coding boot camp. And she actually went on to work at a crypto startup that was building on EOS at the time. And we just stayed in touch over the years. She went on to do some other things. And then she started working for another VC like incubator. And I was working for, ironically, another bank, but as a developer at that time. And I half jokingly asked if they had other positions open because I don't really like the big corporate jobs. I like more of the startup-y type vibes, which crypto really, tends to lean towards when you find a job there. So they actually had a position. I started working for them and I was immediately placed with the Hedgehog team. So Hedgehog was one of the brand new companies that they were incubating. They were sort of just going into the raise. And so I've been on the team since day one, and probably about a year in, the original, founder wanted to go back and do more research focused items. And so I was already, doing, similar to what I'm doing now, basically, which is almost everything but the dev work. And so I was doing a lot of the product management stuff anyways, helping to sort of guide the product. I was pretty involved with the Solana ecosystem. And so it was really trying to cater to what people wanted and, the UX, UI, and all that stuff from a Web3 experience. So I was always helping with that anyways. And so I took over Hedgehog officially, I think around like the middle of like 2022, somewhere around there. So I've been running it since then. We had pivoted a little bit, but we've definitely come full circle and we are sort of full head on attacking the prediction markets on Solana. And so that's kind of where we are now. We have our classic AMM yes, no prediction markets that are live. We also have Parimutuel markets, and right now we are building out our P2P markets. And so we're trying to build out these 3 different market types to build out the best possible permissionless, UI for users to create markets, speculate or bet on markets. And then also on the back end of that, we are actually building out an optimistic oracle so that anybody can resolve the markets.
These people are being rugged. Bad metadata. Their treasury is being drained. Pixelated crab NFTs are no longer the hip thing. The dev has disappeared. If this happens to you or your loved ones, relax. The Future DAO is here to save you with their newfangled token migrator tool.
I just called them.
I put the old token in.
And I got a new one and a fundraise out.
Now look at these people. They've been unrugged by Future DAO, and they've never been happier.
And it was so easy.
The Future DAO, for a better future.
Super cool, sir. You touched on some things I definitely want to circle back to before we keep going forward. Why don't you, how many people are on the Hedgehog team? And, are you in growth mode as we swing through the bull market? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the team right now is pretty lean. So it's myself and 3 others, so just 4 of us total. We are definitely in growth mode and also raise mode. So we are currently working on a raise. So if anybody is interested or knows people that are interested, feel free to DM me, and happy to share more information. But yeah, we may expand a little bit in the future, but as of right now, basically 3 full-time developers, and then myself kind of handling the majority of other things with a little bit of dev work here and there. We do have our own validator, so I mainly manage that on top of everything else, and then we'll just do small pushes every now and then if I need to. But I let my devs handle that because they are much better than I am as far as I don't know any Rust, so as far as that goes, definitely not helpful in any capacity. Although I will say I do my best to try to understand how Solana works, how it operates, to lend sort of helpful ideas or ways that we can improve things or other ways that we can build things, and then get feedback from the devs if that sort of implementation makes sense. So I think it helps having a developer background, being able to sort of iterate faster with them, just because I can think through what parts of the application the tech stack is sort of being touched when we're adding features in. But yeah, I leave the dev work mainly to them.
Yeah, 2 things. One, bullish on small teams. I think that's one thing that I've realized, over the years of doing research and talking with people, is you don't need to have a big team to do good work. And that's evident all over the place. And 2, also bullish on, leaders with coding understanding. It's funny how often I feel like a child when I'm listening to devs go back and forth. And it's you don't necessarily need to know how to code, but it helps you understand what questions to ask, what limitations there are, even if you're not the one punching the numbers in. So props to you, sir. Yeah. Good work. Let's dial down on the product, and let's go on a presumption that a listener has no idea even what a poly market is. Explain what the poly market is, and then walk me through your goals with Parimutuel, what it is and does, and then even PvP.
Yeah, so a high level, prediction markets are basically a way to speculate on really anything, right? So as far as poly market, and also what we have live on our platform, are various markets that basically have a binary outcome, right? So if you've heard of binary options, it's kind of similar. The idea is you can trade yes and no shares, and they should reflect the odds of something happening. So right now, for example, if you had a political market that is, will a Democrat win the presidential election, you can basically buy yes and no shares, and based on the price of those shares, which should trade between $0 and $1, it reflects the odds of that event happening. So I think right now, the Democrat winning might be, 40-some %, which roughly would be 40 cents on the dollar or something like that. So for every share that you buy, it costs you 40 cents. The idea is if you hold that share all the way until the outcome is known, if the outcome ends up being yes, you would be able to redeem that share that you bought for 40 cents for $1. If it ends up being no, then that share is worthless. So you can always trade in and out of those shares in the meantime. But if you hold all the way to the outcome, it's either worth $1 or $0, which is where the binary outcome basically comes into play. So that's the idea of prediction markets. And at a high level, the goal of prediction markets is to basically leverage crowdsourcing information, but applying a financial incentive to it. And so the idea there is that if there are enough people looking at a given market, that all of the available knowledge or data out there will be reflected in the share price. So if you know something that somebody else doesn't know, and you see that the price is very low based on the knowledge that you have a financial incentive, because it's positive EV or positive expected value, to go and buy those shares now, because you can make a return on that investment because the market is mispriced based on data that you have. And so this has kind of led to a lot of people looking at prediction markets instead of just general polling data. And I feel kind of going back to the political example, the most common thing is that a lot of time prediction markets, where you're buying these yes and no shares, are a much better representation or gauge for how actual things will play out, rather than just doing regular old polls, because people are, putting their money where their mouth is. And so I just think that, when people have sort of money on the line or a financial incentive, it it reflects something more accurately than, if you can just click a button or tap a button and you don't really care about what actually happens because there's no risk on the line.
I like that. And hearing you say that really got me thinking about Futarchy and what MetaDAO is doing. And it's like how when people trade, those things get you closer to the truth and faster to the truth, or like a best guess, whatever you want to call it, than just like traditional polling or traditional voting. And so that's actually really cool. Do you know anything about the history of poly markets? Like, did they exist off chain first? I'm going to sound like an idiot saying this.
I don't believe so. So my understanding of kind of like the background of prediction markets, starting with Ethereum, originated with a company called Augur, and that was actually on the ETH L1. And I think I don't want to misspeak here, but I'll give my best remembrance of this stuff. It's been a while since I really read up on it. But I believe Augur was actually originally denominated in Ethereum, just being the base currency that it is. And so then the problem kind of comes into play where it's like you're trying to predict outcomes, but then your currency is also moving in price. And so they've kind of shifted, like right now, like USDC is how our yes, no shares are priced. Same thing with Polymarket. It's basically a US dollar denominated market. So that way, when you look at the expected, like, or the implied odds of like a given thing happening, it's, when it's trading at 40 cents, it's USDC based, that should reflect a 40% odd of something happening. And you don't have to worry about that price also then fluctuating in value because of that. And then the other side of things was being on Ethereum and on the layer one, Augur was very clunky. So it was slow, it was expensive at times to transact. And so it just didn't work well. And then, Polymarket is on Ethereum L2. And so, it was much faster, much cheaper. And so that's kind of where the volume went to with respect to that type of stuff. And sort of since then, there hasn't really been, I guess, a great alternative to use other than, an L2. And so when Solana kind of came about and started gaining popularity in 2020 and 2021, that was kind of the original idea behind Hedgehog. Can we build prediction markets on an even more performant L1 where it's faster, it's cheaper, and kind of see where we can go from there. And I think like one unique thing aside from being fast and cheap is that we are I'll get to the two other market types, but the cool thing is we are exploring the additional composability that the L1 like allows for, and because it's so cheap and fast to transact on Solana. One thing recently that I commented on Twitter as well was somebody was asking about these long-term markets that are prediction markets where, in theory, as soon as this political election ends, you could set up another market that is, who will win the 2028 presidential election. And so if you had a market that's 4 years out, there might be idle liquidity sitting there and it's not earning any yield, and there might not be a ton of volume. And so what Solana and the composability of being on an L1 allows is that we can easily deploy like LP funds, that USDC that's kind of like stuck in that market, into lending and borrowing protocols and earn yield on that USDC while it's sitting there. So now as a liquidity provider, or even somebody that has like a bet that's active, you could potentially be earning passive yield on those funds in addition to being able to place a bet or providing liquidity to a platform.
Wow, super cool. Before I circle back on this vein, that's like you could make a bet on either side of the poly market and take that position and go elsewhere. Could you do the opposite? Could like a protocol team that has an LP put money into your side and provide liquidity from like, is the composability both ways?
It is. So the biggest issue, I guess, with the providing liquidity on our platform is depending on how it's done. So across multiple chains, we've kind of seen Polymarket shift from this, and we're actually looking into this right now. Is basically it's going from like an AMM to a concentrated liquidity AMM or full order book. And so the issues right now are that with just a plain AMM, you run into impermanent loss. And impermanent loss is like, I guess, even more amplified when you inherently have a market where the two tokens diverge in price. That's when you see basically the most drastic impermanent loss, where you can basically lose 100% of your money by providing liquidity. So unless a market is fairly stable in price all the way up until a known point, and you don't think the odds are going to change much, by providing liquidity, you're hoping that there's enough volume that goes off where you can make money in fees. If the prices start moving, that's where you get wrecked very fast on the impermanent loss, basically. So if it's a market where news could come out at any given time, when you're providing liquidity into those markets or even quoting on an order book, you're opening yourself up to a lot of risk there, basically, by having that liquidity position open. So it kind of is a chicken or the egg problem, because you probably want enough markets where the event or known outcome won't be decided until a later date, and so you don't necessarily have that, like, what we call like headline risk of news coming out that's going to drastically change the prices. And if you can provide deep enough liquidity, then the idea is, yes, maybe people will want to put liquidity in here because they can earn money on the volume on fees, and then they would pull it out just like you would in a typical liquidity pool. But without that, or if it's the wrong type of market or the way it's worded, you could have that headline risk, and that headline risk isn't necessarily worth, I guess, that added composability to like another platform. But like you're saying, it is possible. It's just, I guess, like, it does take a little bit more monitoring, and so it's not quite as passive as a lot of other liquidity providing, like in DeFi, where both prices could go up, both prices could go down, both prices could stay flat. With a classic like prediction market where you have yes, no shares, they inherently by default always go in opposite directions. And that divergence causes the worst kind of impermanent loss.
That final piece there was everything I needed. Well, it sounds like you're thinking about it a lot and you understand it a lot, and I really appreciate that. I was going to ask you, and we've kind of already started talking about it. We spoke about it in person. What makes Hedgehog better than Polymarkets? And you've already brought up the fact that it's building on Solana, which allows for everything that we play with. And then you briefly started talking about the addition of your two markets. So why don't you take this time to walk us through what you guys have that Polymarket doesn't, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I think, like, a lot of people ask, like, who are our competitors? And so, Polymarket is obviously one. That's another prediction market on a different chain. The other side of it is, I guess, still, I would say, like, they kind of could be considered a competitor, but they could also sort of be an adjacent product. And that's almost like the on-chain, like, sports betting platforms. And so I've talked with them in the past. Like, I know a lot of the founders of those companies. But what we're trying to add on to our prediction markets, which kind of goes back to it's sometimes tough to get liquidity for some of these because people don't want to take on the impermanent loss risk, or just quoting on an order book, even they don't want to take on that risk. The benefit for our platform is that we're adding in parimutuel markets and PvP or P2P markets. And what we think the big benefit here is that not only, I guess, can you trade those yes and no shares, but a lot of people will trade those yes and no shares, or I guess I should say, don't trade those yes and no shares. They buy the yes or no shares with the expectation of holding them till the resolution or the known outcome. So they sort of see it as like, oh, the yes shares are trading at 5 cents on the dollar. Maybe I'll just take a long shot, because if I hold these 5-cent shares, I'm going to make a 20x on my money. And so kind of the converse of that is, if you want to do that, you can only get as much size as people are willing to sell you in that like liquid market, which might be tough. So the other way we can approach that is with like a P2P market. And that's where you could basically create the exact same market, but you could say, I want to buy $100,000 of yes, and I want these odds. And so you still need somebody to take the other side of the trade. But now you can basically show somebody else, I'm willing to put up $100,000. And if you want to take the other side of that, you can, with those fixed odds. So you don't have to worry about price impact. And both of you can still kind of get that benefit of holding all the way until the expected outcome. And then the market will resolve yes or no. So right now, that's something that, as far as I'm aware, isn't really possible anywhere. And so we're working on consolidating and streamlining that flow. So if there is an AMM like classic market, or even like any sporting event, or these crypto fights that are happening, we want people to be able to easily, in like 2 clicks, say like, I want to bet on this event and I want to bet X amount of money with these odds, and just create that market. And then people would be able to come to the platform and see, all right, this is how much money you can basically put up on the other side. And so you can either fulfill that, or you can make your own market with your own odds, and it would basically sit there, similar to if you go to a sports betting website, or go to like a Vegas casino and go to their sports book. You can go and see the games and say, okay, I want to bet $500 at plus 150 odds on the home team. The idea is you can do the exact same thing on our site, but we're not capping your withdrawals, your deposits, the odds that you want to get. It's just a matter of, if you set really, really poor odds for another person, no one's going to take the other side of your bet, right? So we'll kind of let the market play itself out, but now you're able to get any size that you want. And like, as a, we're not a bookie that's going to then restrict your size, because we don't have to take the other side of your bet. Anybody can come to the platform permissionlessly and say, I'll take the other side of your bet.
That's super cool. It's kind of like a PvP limit order. You're essentially going in and saying, this is the price, this is the size, and then as many people as it takes to fill it, or partially fill. I assume it would be like, if I would have 100K and then only 10K got filled, well, that 10K would be locked in, and the other 90 would just be floating until. Could you put in? Like,
you could just withdraw.
Let's say. So could you also like automate it and say like, good for 1 week? Because let's say the outcome was like a month away, and you wanted to put in 100K at this price for this long, and then only as much got filled in that amount of time, and then whatever didn't get filled at the end of that time would be just auto canceled.
Yeah. So right now, just to simplify the user flow, we do basically have like 2 timestamps, and one is kind of like the timestamp where somebody has to take the other side of your bet, and the other timestamp is where like you could resolve the thing anytime after that. For the sports markets, we kind of just streamline that, and it's all sort of set in the background. So basically anybody could take the other side of your bet all the way up until game time. But you, as the person that creates the market, you can at any time withdraw any unmatched funds. So like you're saying, if you wanted to say, I want to bet $10,000 on, the home team to win at these odds, if people came in and, 2 people both came in and said, I want to bet $500, and they would take your odds, those 2 people would fill $1,000 of your $10,000. If you said, I suddenly don't like these odds because the player gets injured, you could come in and withdraw the remaining $9,000, and you could create a new market at new odds, or you would just have that one, amount that was matched, and that would be it. But you can't cancel that once they're matched. That's kind of the key.
Yeah. Take a step back for a second. Explain Parimutuel.
Yeah. So similar to the PvP markets, it's kind of the same concept. You're effectively placing a deposit or a bet on one outcome, but the difference with Parimutuel is it's completely uncapped. So you could deposit as much money as you want. However, the max that you can win is directly related to the percentage that you deposit on the correct side, and then how much is deposited on the incorrect side. So for example, if there was a sports game and you wanted to bet on the home team, and you put in $500 out of $1,000 on yes, that means your deposit of $500 was 50%. If there was $10,000 bet on no, because people were very confident that the away team was going to win, and there was for whatever reason an upset, your $500 or 50% bet would earn you 50% of the no side. So you would win $5,000 of the no deposits. Obviously, you would get your $500 deposit back, and that would be a big win. The other side of that is if people only put $10 on no, you probably don't want to put a ton of money on yes until more money comes in. So it kind of might take a while to play out sometimes, but the idea is that like deposits could grow over time. And as you see more people deposit, you might want to deposit more on yes so that you can win more of the no deposits. But it's basically just directly correlated to the percentage that you put in. You win that percentage of the other pool.
And fully outcome based, not like prediction where you can kind of trade in and trade out.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can't withdraw funds from PvP or parimutuel. The idea is you're really just depositing and then you're waiting for the outcome, and you're either winning or you're losing your deposits. Yeah.
Super cool. Okay, let's talk about like your journey through, oracles and like information flow. And like when we were an island out together, I was literally listening to you have a conversation with your coworker about just like the most abstract like gambling. And so like talk to me about how that journey's been. Like, have you always been interested in sports and like political outcomes and that whole thing?
Yeah. So I guess to back up, like my interest in data, and I guess even like prediction markets before I just kind of got put into prediction markets, like, I mean, it was good that I was kind of inherently interested because my background's in trading and finance, and I've always sort of been fascinated with data as well, because as a prop trader, it was very like data and news driven. So it's like, how quickly can you get information? How can you disseminate that information? So yeah, like one thing, we're always trying to figure out is how best can we not only streamline the market creation flow to make the market creation permissionless for users, but you really need like clear, detailed ways to resolve a market based on the data that comes out. And so like the hard thing with prediction markets is that unlike, typical perp trading platforms where you can just plug into a Pyth oracle and stream, price feed data in, it's very hard to like stream in these random data points, right? Like who wins in a crypto fight night? There's not like an API readily available out there to stream that data in and resolve that market. Same thing even with political markets. You can kind of scrape stuff, and maybe there are some APIs now, but it's not always great. And so it's just like, how do you do that? And how do you do it in a permissionless manner where you don't have to be responsible for resolving everything? And so that kind of drew us to creating our own oracle, also similar to Polymarket on the EVM chain. They use an oracle called UMA, or at least that's how I say it. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but it's UMA. And basically, it is a way for people to propose data, and then people on chain can dispute that data. And if they do, it goes to a vote, and you can basically vote if it's the correct outcome or not. And so this is a more permissionless way to allow anybody to propose an outcome to any event. So in theory, all of these prediction markets or things that people are betting on, there should be a known outcome at some point. And if there isn't, then, that should be baked into which way it gets resolved. And so the idea is that we're building an optimistic oracle on Solana that not only Hedgehog can utilize, but really anybody could utilize, right? Like you could have an insurance company that's built on chain leverage this, where they could, have insurance adjusters basically go in and propose data saying this is a valid claim or this isn't a valid claim. So there's other ways that people could leverage this oracle. However, obviously, we're building it out with the intention of Hedgehog being the first customer or user of the oracle. And that's so that we can get this off-chain data on chain and be able to use it within the programs to resolve the markets. And so that's kind of like the key linkage of these real world events and making it available as on-chain data for the prediction markets.
That's super cool. And it reminds me of the Parcel talk that I listened to, and talking about how, like, by virtue of them trading real estate value, they needed to build their own oracle because the other ones weren't good enough, and crypto being inherently 24/7. And then so it kind of begets the question. It's like, there's a future where the data you find becomes almost more valuable than the fees you earn from the poly markets. And is that something that you've like considered, that there's a lot of power in this data and there could be customers that you haven't even thought
of? Yes and no. I think so. The idea is that the oracle itself will, like, it's not owned by Hedgehog. So while our team happens to be building it because Hedgehog kind of needs it as a product, the plan is for it to always be open sourced. And so we want other people to contribute to it and, be able to submit PRs. And so hopefully we can sort of figure out over time how to best expand that and allow other people to contribute to this basically like open source on-chain optimistic oracle. And so like, yeah, we hope that drives value in and of itself, and that we can kind of allow the community to contribute to it and realize that value over time. Hedgehog will still sort of be its own entity that just happens to leverage that data. And so I think like, there will be a little bit of value accrual to both because they are able to leverage each other. Inherently the Oracle being sort of that gateway to bringing the data on chain will, probably accrue some value from that. But at the same time, Hedgehog being able to leverage that Oracle and actually have like trading markets, that's where that data ends up flowing to.
Love that. Open sourcing is always a good decision. And I feel like that move is probably going to pay dividends to you guys. At the end of the day, it's like you want more information to flow through there. You want a public good that anybody in Solana can add data to, and that's only going to make your market stronger. So good on you.
We're just excited to really push towards a fully permissionless platform. I think like the ultimate goal is to allow anybody to make a market, bet or speculate in a market, and resolve a market without us really needing to do anything. We just want to provide the UI, and the programs will be deployed on Solana for anybody else basically to leverage.
Love that. I guess is one thing I never asked you was token speculation. Can I ask you about will there be a Hedgehog token?
I mean, yeah, if it makes sense. I mean, the ultimate goal is to be fully decentralized. Like, once I think we get to a good point with the actual like on-chain programs and the protocol itself, if it makes sense to decentralize the platform and allow for people to vote on upgrades or changes to any of that stuff, we'll do what seems right at the time. So definitely always exploring that as a possibility. And yeah, definitely lots of things to consider when thinking about that type of thing. Also, being in the US, it does make it tough. So we always want to make sure we're compliant and operating correctly as US based, employees of the entity itself. But yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Very astute. Okay, let's have a fun round because I mean you're doing the prediction markets, so I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. You can say yes or no, or the outcome, or pass. It's up to you.
All
right. Okay, will Trump win the Republican nomination?
Yes.
Okay, will Florida beat Edmonton in the Stanley Cup Finals?
Ooh. I'm going to say yes, just because it's America versus Canada. So, I have to say yes there.
I am a Canadian, but my best friend's favorite team is Florida. So I might have to agree with you on that, but
all right.
There's not probably many Canadian listeners, so that's our secret. Will Hedgehog NFTs have a floor price over one SOL by the end of June?
Pass.
My man. Okay, will Bitcoin hit 100K by the end of 2024?
Yes.
Nice. I agree with you. Good man. All right, sir. We'll wrap this up. The last thing I like to ask my guests before they depart is what is the thing that has kept Kyle sane through grabbing a project in frickin' 2021 and running it through 2022 bear market, touching grass, playing sports, family. What's your thing, sir?
That's tough. So, I mean, first, I will say, I think the Solana community, the fact that so many people stuck around and there have been like people interacting and that just haven't like left when, to say the least, stuff hit the fan. It's been great to see. But outside of crypto, I think it's really just like the support from my wife, like family meetups. And then, I enjoy cars, so I do cars and coffee on the weekends and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think it's really just like finding things that you enjoy, make sure you're able to get away and still spend time with like family and your loved ones, because as you get older, I think that's stuff that like you sort of take for granted when you're younger and just don't like think about how much time you have left or how many more times you're going to see somebody. And there was one Twitter post one time that I'll just quickly mention. they said try to calculate like the number of times that you're going to see, you know, your siblings, your parents, your grandparents, like for the rest of your life. Because some people, for example, may, you know, move out of state, and so they may only see their parents 3 or 4 times a year for the holidays. So if you're only going home 3 or 4 times a year, and you know your parents only have 30 years left, you're only going to see them 90 times. Like that's kind of crazy. So if you can visit more, if you can even just call them, cherish like all of those moments. I think like that's kind of the biggest thing. Just like make sure you are spending time with your loved ones, and spend time not on your cell phone with them. I think that's the other key. Like try to take a break from Twitter, try to actually be present, enjoy that moment. And it is kind of crazy. Like, you know, while I love expensive things, I think like the heart to hearts with your friends and family, they start to matter more as you get older.
Amen. Well said. Close to the heart. With that, sir, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great to meet you at Islandale. I think, you know, back to the community keeping you sane, you know, it's meeting people like you and just others in person at events that, you know, make Solana and the community what it is. So appreciate this.
Fuck yeah. Much love.